Millionaire CEO dining alone hears a song, then discovers ex-wife, begging with identical quadruplets. Before we begin, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We love seeing how far these stories travel. Now enjoy the story. The sky above Manhattan burned gold and crimson, bleeding into the glass towers that stabbed at dusk. From the rooftop of the Bellamy, one of the city's most exclusive restaurants, Graham Whitaker sat at a corner table, untouched wine swirling in a crystal glass as he stared into nothing. He wasn't here for the view. The Bellamy was where his father used to bring clients to close deals that built an empire, and where Graham now came to remember how little any of it meant without someone to toast with. The city buzzed below, but the air up here was too quiet. Even the waiter had stopped asking if he wanted anything else. "Will you be dining alone this evening, Mr. Whitaker?" the maitre d' had asked earlier, already knowing the answer. "Yes," Graham had replied, as always. He ran a hand over his neatly shaven jaw, silver threading his dark hair at the temples, and tried to focus on the spreadsheet glowing faintly on his tablet. Tomorrow's quarterly report. Next week's Dubai expansion pitch. Anything but the familiar ache in his chest. Then he heard it. Soft at first, almost drowned by traffic and distance, a melody floated upward from the street below. It wasn't modern, not pop, not jazz. It was something older, slower, a lullaby, his mother's lullaby. He hadn't heard that tune since he was a boy, since she died. The sound of it cracked something open inside him, a place he thought long buried. He stood without realizing it, walking to the glass railing and peering down. And there they were. A woman sat on the curb near a lamppost, flickering to life. Her hair was pulled into a low braid streaked with tiredness. Her coat was too thin for the weather, but it was her. Lena. His Lena. She was holding a violin, no amplifier, no speakers, just raw strings and aching memory. And surrounding her, seated on a makeshift crate and scattered blankets, were 4 boys. Each sang the lullaby, softly harmonizing like they'd known it from birth. Graham's chest tightened as he looked closer. The jawlines, the hair, the eyes, his eyes, all 4 of them. He stepped back as if burned. The rooftop beneath his feet seemed to tilt. His heart pounded against his ribs like it was trying to break free. It couldn't be. It couldn't be. He hadn't seen Lena in almost a decade. The last time they spoke, she was tearful, distant, and then gone. Vanished. No goodbye. No explanation. Just a 1-line note left behind in their penthouse. "Please don't look for me." Silas, his father, had told him she didn't want the life, that she'd made her choice. He never said anything about children, especially not 4. Graham pressed his hand against the cool glass and tried to collect himself, but the world below kept moving. The boys began passing around a paper coffee cup. Pedestrians dropped in coins a few bills. Then one of the boys, shorter than the others, with an oversized hoodie and wild curls, stood and bowed with a flourish. He must have been 9, maybe 10. He looked directly up at the rooftop, right at Graham, and smiled. Graham stumbled back. It was the same smile that had stared back at him in childhood photos his mother used to keep by her piano. He turned sharply, grabbed his coat, and threw a few bills on the table without counting. By the time he reached the street, they were gone. The corner near the lamppost was empty. The crate, the blanket, even the small cardboard sign that said "Singing for Shelter" had vanished. All that remained was a piece of paper fluttering across the sidewalk like a lost leaf. He chased it down, catching it just before it hit a puddle. It was a child's letter, written in red crayon with uneven lines and smudged corners. There was a drawing at the top, 4 stick figures holding hands next to a taller one with question marks over his head. He read the words aloud, breath fogging in the winter air. "Dear Santa, my name is Caleb. I don't want toys. I just want to know who my daddy is. Mama says he's in the sky like you, but I think maybe he's not. Can you help us find him? Isaac says maybe he's watching. Micah says it's too late, but Leo says never give up. So I'm asking you, just one Christmas wish. Love, Caleb." Graham's hands shook. The paper crinkled as he folded it. His breath came in uneven gasps. People passed him on the sidewalk, but he was still like time had frozen around him. 4 boys, 1 letter, a melody no one else could have known. A lie he'd believed for 10 years. He raised his eyes to the dusky sky, blood and fire still burning in the clouds, and whispered one word: Lena. Across the street, hidden behind a pillar in the alleyway between a dry cleaner and a pawn shop, Lena held her breath as she watched him. She hadn't expected him to come down. She hadn't expected him to still recognize the song. And she certainly hadn't expected Caleb's letter to land right at his feet. Isaac stood beside her, clutching her coat. Was that him? Lena didn't answer, because if she opened her mouth, she wasn't sure if words or tears would come out. Graham stood motionless on the sidewalk, the letter still clutched in his hand, his breath curling in the cold air like smoke from something smoldering deep inside. The street noise swelled around him, horns, footsteps, someone laughing from a nearby cafe, but it all felt muted, like he was underwater. The boy's handwriting shook him, the innocence, the longing, the name Caleb. He read the letter again, slower this time, as if each word could explain how 4 boys bearing his face were standing next to the woman who once tore his heart in half. He hadn't allowed himself to speak her name in years. Lena. He remembered the smell of her coffee in the morning, the way she danced barefoot in their kitchen when she thought no one was watching, the sound of her laughter at midnight, the tears she shed the night she told him she was done trying to fit into a life built for someone else's approval. She had been pregnant that week. He remembered how she reached for her stomach unconsciously, and then she vanished. His father had said she left, that she took care of the situation, that it was for the best. Graham had believed him. His throat tightened. Across the street, a violin string snapped. The sound echoed faintly, as if the instrument itself had cried out. He turned instinctively. There was no one there now, only echoes, only questions, only... A few blocks away, beneath the soft orange glow of a street lamp, Lena crouched beside a dumpster and tried to calm her racing heart. Isaac crouched beside her, holding her hand with a seriousness that always startled her. "Why did we run?" he asked quietly. Lena touched his cheek. "Because I wasn't ready. For him." She hesitated. For what comes next? Behind them, Leo skipped small stones against the curb, humming the last bars of the Lullaby. Caleb sulked nearby, chewing his thumbnail. He knew he'd lost something, even if he didn't realize what. And Micah was scanning the area, protective, as always. "Do you think he saw the letter?" Isaac whispered. Lena closed her eyes. "Yes, I think he did." And he asked, "And now?" "We wait." Back in his car, Graham drove without direction, the city lights streaking past in a blur. He didn't call his driver, didn't alert his assistant, didn't return the 5 unread messages blinking on his phone. He just drove. He passed 52nd Street, where he and Lena used to go to jazz clubs. He passed the bookstore where they'd chosen baby names once before everything fell apart. And then, without thinking, he turned into a side street that led to Whitaker Tower. His office loomed above, sterile and gleaming. But tonight, for the first time, he didn't go inside. He just sat in the car, holding a child's letter to Santa in one hand and a decades-old grief in the other. The next morning, Graham Whitaker canceled his entire schedule. Not postponed. Canceled. His assistant Carla blinked in disbelief when he told her. But the Q4 briefing with the Dubai partners, push it. All of it. She hesitated. "Sir, they flew in," I said, "push it." He didn't raise his voice, but something in his eyes, tight, unreadable, told her this wasn't the usual billionaire mood swing. It was something deeper. Older. A thread from the past pulling him out of his routines and into something he didn't yet understand. Graham closed his office door behind him and reached for the folded paper he'd kept in his coat pocket all night. Caleb's letter. The crayon marks were faintly smudged where he'd touched them too often, trying to make sense of every word. "Mama says he's in the sky like you. But I think maybe he's not." The line pierced him. He sat at the edge of the leather couch, the city stretching out through the window behind him, and pulled out his phone. Not to call, just to stare at a number he hadn't dialed in a decade. Lena Castillo. Her old cell. Her name still sat in his contacts like a frozen timestamp. She had never changed it. He had never deleted it. He tapped the screen, let it ring once, then stopped. What would he even say? Hey, it turns out you didn't have an abortion. Surprise, no. He needed more than assumptions. He needed truth, facts, proof. He stood and moved to his desk, buzzing Carla through the intercom. Get me the name of the shelter near 10th and Clarkson, the one that offers musical programs for children. Right away, sir. And send a team to discreetly inquire about a woman named Lena Castillo and 4 boys under 10. No press, no interference. Quietly. Understand, yes, Mr. Whitaker. He ended the call and finally let himself breathe. The silence around him felt heavier now. It carried echoes. Lena hadn't slept. She sat curled on her cot in the shared shelter dorm, fingers tangled in a fraying blanket, eyes fixed on the door. The boys were still asleep, except for Isaac, always the quiet observer. He sat beside her, now sketching in a notebook. It was his way of asking questions without using words. She glanced at the page. A man, with 4 small figures beside him, all holding hands. She swallowed. That's nice, baby. Was it him? He asked, voice barely above a whisper. Lena didn't answer at first. She didn't want to lie. But the truth was jagged and unfinished. It was someone from a long time ago. Isaac looked down again, then drew another figure her, just out of reach. Will he come back? He asked. She wanted to say no. She wanted to believe she could protect them all from the storm outside. But storms didn't wait for permission. They just came. I don't know, she said. Isaac simply nodded and went back to drawing. By midday, Graham's assistant returned with details. Lena was indeed working at Starlight Haven, a transitional shelter known for women's programs and after-school care. She volunteered daily, teaching music, no less. The violin hadn't been a coincidence. The boys were hers, all 9 years old, registered as Isaac, Caleb, Leo, and Micah Castillo. No mention of a father, no birth certificates listing him, no contact from the Whitaker family on file. Graham didn't know if he wanted to scream or cry. His father had done this. He knew it. Somehow. Silas had always hated Lena, called her a distraction, a soft spot, something unsuited to a legacy like Whitaker Holdings. But to go this far, to bury 4 grandchildren, to steal them from him. Graham rose from his chair, slipped Caleb's letter into his coat pocket, and left the office without a word. Starlight Haven was tucked between 2 abandoned storefronts, just a block from the corner where he'd first seen them. It wasn't much chipped brick, a sagging awning, graffiti that no one had bothered to scrub off. But there were flower pots in the windows, crayon art taped to the door, life in spite of everything. He knocked. A woman with graying braids and a sharp eye opened it. We don't accept walk-ins during meal prep, sir. I'm not here for food, Graham said. She studied him, and something shifted in her gaze. You're him. Excuse me, I said you're him. She glanced over her shoulder. She said if he ever showed up, he'd be tall, expensive-looking, and late by about 10 years. Graham's mouth went dry. You're Aunt Mireille. She opened the door wider. Come in, but don't expect hugs. Lena didn't flinch when she saw him. She stood at the far end of the multi-purpose room, sleeves rolled up, surrounded by trays of food and volunteers. Her eyes locked onto his like magnets that had been resisting for years, but finally gave up the fight. Graham, she said softly. He didn't speak. He just held up the letter. Lena's shoulders dropped. Where did you get that? She asked. Caleb dropped it. I told him not to bring it last night, she muttered to herself, brushing a hand through her hair. Graham stepped closer. You told me you didn't want children. I never said that. You said you couldn't do it. You left me a note. I didn't write that note. He froze. She looked up, tears building but unspilled. Your father did. Or someone he paid to. I was scared, Graham. He offered me money to leave. Then he threatened my aunt. Said if I didn't disappear, I'd regret it. Graham staggered back like the words had weight. Lena stepped forward now, voice trembling. I was pregnant, and alone, and terrified. I didn't know who I could trust. I didn't even tell Aunt Mireille until months later. She took us in when I had nowhere else. He shook his head slowly. You should have told me. I had a right. I had to choose between telling you and keeping them safe from the man who controlled your life. Silence. Heavy, piercing, real. Then finally softly Graham asked, Are they mine? Lena met his eyes. Look at them and tell me they're not. The air between them pulsed thick with the weight of words that had waited a decade. Lena didn't look away. She couldn't afford to. She had spent too many nights wondering what she would say if this moment ever came, and now that it had, her voice was steadier than she expected. I was 29, she said. Pregnant. Fired from my job. And your father told me that if I didn't disappear, he'd ruin more than just my life. Graham's jaw tightened. He's dead now. That doesn't change what he did. Or what you let him do. He flinched. Truth had a way of cutting deeper than accusations. I begged you to see me that week, she continued. I called. I texted. Then suddenly you were unreachable. Then came the money, the lawyers, and a note that said, for the best. I thought maybe you wrote it. I didn't. You never tried to find me. He opened his mouth, closed it. Lena nodded slowly. Exactly. In the far corner of the room, the clang of trays and the laughter of children filled the silence they left hanging. Graham finally said, I buried myself in work. I thought, you ended things, that you didn't want the baby. My father told me you'd gone to a clinic and then fled. I didn't want to believe it. But you were gone. She shook her head. I didn't run. I was pushed. And I kept running because I didn't know if you were part of it. He stepped back, breathing hard, as if trying to reshape a puzzle that had been glued together with lies. They think I'm dead, he whispered. Lena's face softened. At first, yes. I told them you were in the sky, like Santa, like stories that help children sleep. And now they're old enough to ask harder questions. She looked down at her hands. I never wanted to hate you, Graham. I wanted to protect them from being hurt, from being rejected, from becoming a line item on someone's inheritance document. He blinked, stunned. Is that what you think I'd do? I didn't know what to think, she said. You weren't there. He nodded slowly, painfully. I want to know them, he said at last. Lena's body stiffened, but her eyes didn't flare with anger. Just fear and exhaustion. I'm not saying no, she said carefully. But if you're going to be in their lives, it can't be for a moment. It has to be always. You don't just drop in and disappear again. I won't, he said. You say that now, she said. But they'll ask questions. They'll test you. Caleb's already angry at the world. Micah questions everything. Isaac hides. And Leo still believes in magic. Graham's voice caught. So did I. She paused, searching his face. Then prove it. From the hallway, Aunt Mireille watched the two of them standing in the glow of fluorescent lights surrounded by trays of soup and folding chairs. 10 years of silence cracked just enough for something fragile to begin again. And in Lena's apron pocket, 4 more letters to Santa sat unread. Each one began the same way. Dear Santa, if you're busy, can you ask my daddy instead? Graham had negotiated billion-dollar deals, debated global CEOs, and stared down entire boards of directors. But none of that prepared him for the nerves that hit him outside Starlight Haven. 2 mornings later, coffee in hand, coat collar turned up against the cold, and a clipboard tucked beneath his arm with a false name scribbled on it, Gregory Watts. Volunteering anonymously wasn't Lena's idea. It was Aunt Mireille's. They don't need a corporate knight charging in to fix everything, she'd told him bluntly. They need a man willing to show up without applause. Let them see who you are, not who you were told to be. So Graham said yes. No chauffeurs, no suits, no last name. Just Gregory here to help out in the after-school room, wash dishes in the kitchen, or do whatever was needed. The first day the boys didn't notice him. At least not directly. But Isaac glanced at him. Twice. Micah observed in silence, eyebrows slightly furrowed. Leo asked if he could help carry the crayons. And Caleb scowled. "What's your job?" he asked bluntly during snack time. "I'm a helper," Graham replied, folding napkins. "You don't look like a helper. You look like someone who owns the place." Graham smiled. "Do I? Maybe I just iron my shirts." Caleb crossed his arms. "You didn't iron that one, right?" Then he turned and walked away. Each afternoon for the next week, Graham returned. He helped with math homework and broke up an argument over glue sticks. He learned that Micah loved puzzles and that Isaac read quietly to the younger kids when he thought no one was looking. Leo latched onto him the quickest. "You smell like pine trees," the boy said once, hugging his waist unprompted. "That's what Dad smells like in my dreams." Graham had to turn away for a long time after that. On Thursday, Graham arrived early and found Lena in the music room tuning an old upright piano with one hand while balancing donation receipts in the other. "You're early," she said, not looking up. "I brought supplies," he said, holding up a bag. "Colored pencils, markers, glue." "Nice of Gregory Watts," she replied with a raised brow. He exhaled. "How long did it take you to figure it out?" "I knew the second you walked in wearing shoes that cost more than our monthly grocery budget." She finally looked at him, eyes soft but tired. "But I let you stay. I'm glad you did." She nodded toward the bag. "Thanks for the glue. Caleb's been building a spaceship out of cereal boxes," I saw Graham said. "He even included boosters." "And escape pods." "Smart kid," Lena murmured. "He's the hardest to reach," I noticed, Graham said. "He watches me like I'm going to vanish." Lena looked down. "He's had enough people vanish." Silence stretched between them. Then tentatively, Graham said, "I've scheduled a DNA test. Private lab. I'm not here to prove anything to you, not anymore, but I need it. For me. For them. For the truth to be official." Lena nodded. "I get it." She pressed one more key, letting it ring in the quiet. "They already know," she said after a moment. "Not the full truth, but they know you're more than just a helper. Even Caleb. Especially Caleb," she said. "He just pretends he doesn't." Later that afternoon, Graham found himself in the reading corner beside Isaac. The boy had a worn copy of The Wind in the Willows open in his lap. "I like this one," Graham said. "Toad's a handful." Isaac gave the faintest of smiles. "Do you like to read?" he asked, barely audible. "I used to," Graham said. "But then I got too busy." Isaac looked up. "Too busy for books." Graham paused. "Too busy for a lot of things I shouldn't have been." Isaac turned a page. "I think people forget books are where the truth hides." Graham blinked, caught off guard by the boy's quiet wisdom. "Do you write too?" he asked. Isaac nodded, tapping his temple. "In here. Maybe someday on paper. Promise me I get the first copy." The boy didn't answer, but his next page turn was slower, more thoughtful. The test results came back 3 days later. Graham sat in his car outside the shelter, envelope in hand, heart thundering. He didn't need to open it. He already knew. But he did anyway. Positive. 99.99999%. He stared at the paper, then pressed it against the steering wheel and laughed. It wasn't a joyous laugh, it was relief. A shaking, bone-deep release of something that had sat in his chest for 10 years. They were his, all 4 of them. That evening, Lena met him outside the shelter with her arms crossed, her breath visible in the air. "Is it confirmed?" she asked. He nodded and handed her the envelope. She didn't open it. "Do you feel different?" she asked him. "I feel like I've finally been handed a key to a door I should have walked through 9 years ago." And now he met her eyes. "Now I learn how to be the person waiting on the other side." She didn't say anything, but she didn't look away. The next day when Graham walked into the shelter, Caleb was building something again, this time with Legos. He didn't look up when he spoke. "So, your name's not Gregory?" "No, it's Graham. Graham Whitaker." "Yes." Caleb finally met his gaze. "That's a weird name." Graham smiled. "I've heard worse." Caleb considered that, then held up a Lego piece. "You know how to build a rocket. Only if you help. Caleb handed him the piece. It wasn't a truce, but it was a start. The rocket took shape slowly, but something else was building faster silence that wasn't awkward anymore. It was thoughtful. Caleb handed Graham pieces like a commander assigning parts of a mission. Micah says real rockets use liquid fuel. Caleb said, not looking up. Micah's right, Graham replied, but Legos don't come with that. So we improvise. Caleb smirked just for a second. Micah also says you look nervous. Graham arched an eyebrow. Do I? A little. I guess that's fair, Graham admitted. Meeting 4 kids who might be your sons, it's a little intimidating. Caleb finally glanced up. You said might, but Mom said it's real now. It is. So why don't you just act like a dad? The words hit Graham like a cold wind. I don't know what that looks like, he said honestly. Caleb tilted his head. You're a grown-up. You should know. Graham thought about that. I didn't have the best example. Caleb picked up a blue piece and snapped it into place. You don't need to be good at it. You just have to not leave. Graham swallowed. I'm not going anywhere, even if we don't like you. Even then. Caleb said nothing, but he scooted over a bit, creating space between them, just wide enough for Graham to sit fully beside him. Later that evening, Graham joined the boys for cleanup duty. Leo insisted on leading a parade line with the broom, while Isaac carefully organized crayons by color. Micah, clipboard in hand, assigned tasks with quiet authority. Leo, table wipes. Isaac, book return. Mr. Graham, trash bin duty. Mr. Graham. Leo giggled. He's our dad. We should call him something cooler. Graham's breath caught, but he didn't interrupt. I like Commander, Micah said. No, Leo beamed. Let's call him Rocket Dad. Caleb, folding chairs. Nearby groaned. That's dumb. I think it's awesome, Leo defended. You said he's building a rocket, right? That's like science dad stuff. Caleb shrugged. He hasn't left yet, so maybe. It wasn't much. But coming from Caleb, it felt like 1,000 doors creaking open. As the room emptied and the boys went to brush their teeth, Lena lingered in the hallway watching Graham gather glue caps from under the tables. You're surprisingly good with them, she said, arms crossed but eyes softer than before. They make it easy, Graham replied. No, they don't, she countered with a smile. They're all little tornadoes with feelings. I like tornadoes, he said. They change things. She watched him for a long beat. They'll want consistency, especially Caleb. He sees the world in terms of who shows up and who disappears. I'll show up. Every day, every possible day. She gave a small, tired smile. That's a start. And that night, in a journal hidden beneath Caleb's mattress, a new entry appeared. He's weird. He doesn't know how to build a rocket right, but he didn't walk away. Micah says that means something. Maybe it does. Graham hadn't returned to his penthouse in nearly 2 weeks. It was still spotless, of course. His housekeeping service never missed a beat. But as he stepped through the double glass doors, the stillness felt different this time. Not soothing. Not impressive. Empty. Every corner gleamed with polished surfaces and carefully curated art, but the silence mocked him. He stood in the hallway for a long time, Caleb's journal entry echoing in his mind. But he didn't walk away. That mattered. More than any square footage. And yet, walking into this sterile monument to success, Graham saw it with new eyes. There was no corner for reading, no glue-stained table for building rockets, no music, no fingerprints on the glass or juice stains on the floor, no life. The DNA test results had changed something not just in paperwork, but in presence. Lena hadn't let him take the boys overnight. She was still cautious, guarded. But she let them spend afternoons with him now at the library, the science museum, the park down the block. They were forming rhythms, and rhythms Graham had learned were the roots of trust. The boys had found their own favorites. Leo loved the aquarium and ran commentary like a tiny tour guide. Micah preferred the tech exhibit and asked questions Graham sometimes had to Google. Isaac liked quiet corners and story time. And Caleb tolerated it all as long as he wasn't left out. They came back every evening with smudges on their faces and stars in their eyes, but they never came here, not to this home. So Graham decided to change that. The penthouse renovation started the next day. He didn't bring in architects or stylists. He cleared space himself, had the dining table moved to make room for a craft station, converted the guest room into a reading nook with beanbags and a tiny bookshelf. He swapped out one of the unused offices for a music corner, even renting a full-size keyboard and a second-hand drum kit. He stood in the middle of the transformed space, saw a pair of toy astronaut helmets beside the window, and smiled. Then he took photos of each new room. He attached them to an email for Lena with the subject line, 4 rooms. 1 heart, no strings. She didn't reply that night, or the next. But on the 3rd day, she showed up outside Whitaker holding scarf wrapped tight against the wind, holding a folded piece of paper. "You built them a home," she said. "I built them space," Graham replied. "You said they needed their own corners of the world." She held out the paper. It was a drawing, pencil and crayon. 4 boys each in a different room, a big heart in the center, and in the corner a woman standing beside a door holding a key. "I didn't draw this," she said. "Micah did." Graham looked down at the picture, his throat tightening. He said, "The heart's the part they share," Lena added. "But the doors stay open only if I keep the key." He looked up at her. "Do you want to?" Her voice was quiet. "I want them to feel safe. And I want to believe you've changed. But I'm not ready to live with you, Graham. Not yet." "I understand," he said. "That's not what I'm asking." "Then what are you asking?" He reached into his coat pocket and handed her a file folder. Inside was a proposal with architectural sketches, zoning requests, and a mission statement. Lena flipped through the first few pages. A transitional housing complex. Near their school, he nodded. Separate wings for single mothers. Childcare. Community gardens. Education programs. And the director's unit is yours. She looked stunned. "You want me to run this? I want you to build it with me," he said. "But you'll own the vision. I'll fund it quietly." "Why?" she whispered. "Because I want the boys to live in a world where love makes space for other people. Not walls, not threats, not deals behind closed doors. And because I want to do more than show up. I want to serve something." Her eyes glistened, but no tears fell. "I don't need a savior, Graham. I know," he said. "I need one, and I want to become it by building something that never takes family away from anyone again." They stood on the sidewalk, New York winds rushing past, and the silence between them felt warm this time, tentative but alive. She handed him back the folder. "Start with 1 building," she said, "not 10. He smiled. "I already bought the land." That weekend, Lena brought the boys to see the penthouse. Not to stay overnight, just to visit. Graham welcomed them with pizza, a no-shoes rule, and a box labeled Top Secret Rocket Lab 2.0. Micah ran straight for the bookshelf. Isaac settled under the piano with a stack of graphic novels. Leo began composing a melody on the keyboard. And Caleb. He stared at the heart-shaped rug in the middle of the room, then looked up at Graham. "You got my letter," he said. "I did. And you didn't leave. I'm still here." Caleb nodded, then stepped forward and reached into his coat pocket. He handed Graham a Lego brick, just one. "I saved this from the rocket," he said. "It's the last piece." Graham took it gently. "Where does it go?" "Wherever you want to stay." Lena lingered in the hallway of the penthouse longer than she expected. She watched through the glass wall as her boys explored the new space, not cautiously, but with the kind of wide-eyed curiosity she hadn't seen in years. Like they had stumbled into a spaceship, one that somehow felt built for them. Isaac was already curled on a beanbag beneath a floor lamp, lost in a graphic novel. Leo spun slowly in the piano chair, humming his fingers, testing out each key. Micah had discovered a drawer of laminated science kits, inspecting each one with serious delight. Even Caleb, her firestorm, was quietly peering through a telescope pointed toward the skyline. She stepped inside. "Careful," she said, not unkindly. "This place looks fancy." Graham, who was crouched by the snack station unpacking juice boxes, looked up. "It's just a place. It's who's in it that makes it something more. Lena gave a small huff of amusement. You used to say things like that when you were trying to close a deal. I mean it now, he replied, standing. She glanced at the wall where 4 framed drawings hung at perfect eye level. Each was signed with a different name in childlike handwriting. They hadn't drawn them here, he must have collected them from the shelter. He'd taken pieces of their life and made space for them here. Still, her arms crossed. This doesn't mean we're moving in, she said. I know. And I'm not changing their routine just because you're ready now. I wouldn't ask you to. Her eyes searched his, wary and tired, but also touched by something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years: relief. You're not trying to win me back, are you? Graham hesitated. No, he said softly. I'm trying to earn my place. Wherever you choose to put me. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The city pulsed beneath them, distant and golden. Finally, Lena stepped further in and picked up one of the picture books Graham had laid out for the reading nook. The Little House, she read aloud. Good choice. Do you even remember what this one's about? Graham smiled. The little house that didn't fit in with the big city, until someone brought life back to it. Lena murmured. Fitting. Then she nodded toward the proposal folder he'd left on the coffee table. You said the duplexes would be near the boys' school 4 blocks away, and the community kitchen designed, with space for a small cafe. I thought you might want to run it with the women you train. She nodded slowly, not committing. You've thought of everything. No, he said. But I'm trying. From the keyboard, Leo called out, Mom, Mr. Graham's piano actually works. It doesn't buzz like the one at the shelter. Lena looked at him, brows raised. Graham chuckled. I had it tuned. She turned to him. You remember the lullaby? He nodded. I hear it differently now. Her voice softened. So do I. Snow had started falling early that morning, a soft, steady drift that blanketed the sidewalks and turned traffic lights into tiny, glowing ornaments in the haze. Inside Brookline Elementary, the gymnasium pulsed with excitement. Paper snowflakes dangled from strings overhead. Teachers wrangled groups of costumed kids into rough lines near the makeshift stage. Folding chairs squeaked across the floor as parents shuffled in, murmuring greetings and clutching coffee cups. At the back of the room, Graham Whitaker stood just inside the doorway, his coat still dusted with snow. He scanned the crowd, his eyes locking onto 4 familiar heads seated in the front row. Isaac, Caleb, Leo, and Micah, each in a holiday sweater too big for their frame, each chatting animatedly with classmates. And beside them, arms crossed and expression unreadable, sat Lena. She turned, slightly noticed him, and gave a small nod. It wasn't warm, but it wasn't cold either. He would take that. The event started with a second-grade poem recital. Then came the choir's off-key rendition of Jingle Bell Rock, which made Leo giggle so hard his shoulders bounced. Then finally it was the 4th grade's turn. Lena leaned forward. So did Graham. A hush fell over the room as 4 boys stepped up to the center. No backup singers, no teacher prompting from the side. Just a violinist, a teenage girl waiting in the wings with a single note. Leo took the mic. Hi, I'm Leo, he said. And these are my brothers Isaac, Caleb, and Micah. Polite applause. We wanted to sing something our mom taught us, but also something our grandma used to sing. Lena inhaled sharply. Graham felt his heart stop. She died before we were born. Leo continued, but my dad says she used to sing this to him too. The room stilled. Graham blinked. Lena turned. Leo glanced at him once, just once, and gave a quiet nod. Then they sang. The same lullaby. The one from the street corner. The one from Graham's childhood, from the days when his mother used to stroke his hair and whisper promises in a language only love understood. Only now, it was different. It was harmony. Micah's voice steady and low. Isaac's soft and haunting. Caleb's rough around the edges but real. And Leo clear and bright like bells ringing through snow. The room blurred. Graham didn't cry often. He wasn't built for it. But he cried now. After the performance, the boys were swept away by classmates and cocoa tables. Parents mingled. Graham found a quiet spot near the coat racks, breathing slowly, trying to process what had just happened. Then Aunt Mireille appeared beside him, bundled in a quilted coat and holding 2 cups of cider. She handed him one without a word. They stood in silence for a moment before she said, "They planned that song a week ago." Graham blinked. "A week?" She nodded. "Leo told me they wanted to surprise you." He swallowed hard. "They said I was their dad." "They didn't say it with words," she replied. "They said it with music, like Lena once did." He looked at her. "You knew, didn't you, all those years, that Silas had something to do with it?" Her face darkened. "He threatened me, said he'd take the boys, said he'd make sure Lena never worked again, that no school would touch a scandal like hers." Graham's jaw tightened. "He used the same tactics on me, but I was too blinded by loyalty to question it." "You were also just a son," she said gently, "grieving your mother, trying to live up to a legacy that didn't deserve you." He shook his head. "I don't know if I can undo what he did." "You can't," she said. "But you can write something better after the damage. You've already started." He looked across the room at Lena, now kneeling to help Caleb with a fallen button. "She still doesn't trust me completely." "She shouldn't," Mireille replied. "Not yet. Trust isn't a gift, it's a daily decision. But she sees you, more now than before." He watched Lena stand brush snow from Caleb's sleeve and laugh at something Leo said. It hit him. Then the sound of her laugh wasn't the same as it used to be. It was lower, a little sadder, a little stronger. He wanted to be the reason it became lighter again. Later that evening, Lena found him standing beside the now empty stage. "They wanted you here," she said. "They practiced in the basement after homework all week. I didn't know they knew the whole song." They didn't. They remembered the first few notes from the street performance. Then Leo asked me what came next. They built it from memory, from instinct. He nodded slowly. "You cried," she added, quieter now. "I did. They noticed." Graham smiled faintly. "Of course they did." She hesitated. "We're still figuring things out. I'm not ready to talk about anything beyond this." "I know," he said. "I'm not asking. But the way they look at you now," she swallowed. "They're starting to believe they belong to someone again." Graham met her eyes. "They always did." She paused, then nodded. "We'll come for dinner, once, next week." His eyes lit up. "Just tell me what they like." "Anything but asparagus," she said, turning to go. Micah once declared it an enemy of the state. He laughed, really laughed for the first time in a long time. And that night when he returned to his penthouse and hung his coat by the door, he noticed something on the craft table, a folded piece of paper, drawn in crayon, a Christmas tree, and under it 5 stick figures, 4 small, 1 tall, all smiling, labeled us, and above them, written in Leo's messy handwriting, "Family doesn't need a last name. Just love that lasts." Lena slipped away from the crowd and found a quiet spot behind the school library wall where the windows looked out over the snowy playground. She needed a moment. Just one. Inside the gymnasium, parents clapped and chatted, oblivious to the emotional earthquake that had just cracked through her chest. The boys had sung that lullaby without telling her, without rehearsing it in front of her. They had chosen it for him, her mother's lullaby. The one Lena had sung to them as babies when they couldn't sleep. The one she used to hum through tears on nights she thought they'd never be safe. And now, they had sung it to the man who'd once been both her greatest love and deepest wound. She wiped her eyes. She didn't want to feel grateful. Not yet. But she did. Because somehow, over the past few weeks, Graham had shifted. Not by force, not by money, but by showing up with juice boxes, Lego bricks, and a quiet patience that softened even Caleb's stubborn edges. He was trying. He wasn't asking for trust, he was earning it. And that made it harder to hold on to her anger. Harder to pretend she hadn't missed him every day of the boys' lives, even when she told herself she hadn't. Behind her, the door creaked. It was Isaac. He didn't speak, just leaned against the wall beside her, watching the snow drift across the empty swing sets. "Did you like the song?" he asked after a while. Lena nodded, Her voice caught in her throat. Very much. Leo was scared to sing the high part, Isaac said, but he said it was okay if Dad was watching. She turned. You called him Dad. Isaac's gaze didn't waver. He is, isn't he? She nodded slowly. He is. I think Caleb knows it too, he added. He just doesn't like surprises. Neither do I, Lena whispered. Isaac reached into his coat pocket and handed her a folded piece of paper. He wanted to throw it away. I kept it. It was another letter. To Santa, written in Caleb's sharp-angled handwriting. Dear Santa, I saw him. The man from the dreams. The one with the eyes like mine. He cried. I didn't think grown-ups did that. I think maybe you brought him back. So thanks. But next year, can I just have the same thing again? Just more time. Love, Caleb. Lena pressed the letter to her heart and closed her eyes. Snow tapped gently against the window behind them. In the distance, laughter echoed from the gym, followed by the sound of Micah insisting that cider should be a year-round beverage. Lena smiled. Maybe this wasn't the end of the story she'd feared. Maybe this was the next chapter. The construction site was quiet in the early morning light. Pale winter sun spilled over the scaffolding, casting long shadows across the frost-covered lot. Graham stood near the edge, hard hat in hand, coffee growing cold in his gloved fingers. It didn't look like much yet, just a few framed walls and poured concrete. But to him, it was the shape of something new. Something that didn't have to come with apologies or regret. The community duplex was finally becoming real. One side would hold 6 transitional apartments for single mothers each, with 2 bedrooms, a kitchen, and a place to breathe. The other side, a childcare and tutoring center with flexible workspace for women trying to restart careers. And tucked in the middle, a modest manager's unit, Lena's. She hadn't said yes, not officially. But she'd come to every planning meeting, challenged every line of the proposal, ripped apart the first draft of the floor plans and asked for more natural light, fewer glass boxes, and a courtyard where kids could play without needing permission. He had listened. He was still listening. Morning came a voice from behind. Lena. She wore a puffer coat, a scarf wrapped tight, and a clipboard tucked beneath one arm. No makeup, no pretense, just her. You're early, he said. So are you. She walked beside him, nodding toward the frames. That wall's not to code. There's no support beam on the north side. Graham chuckled. Already noted. The crew's fixing it this afternoon. I figured. She didn't smile, but something in her posture softened. They stood there in silence for a while, watching as a truck pulled in and dropped off pallets of insulation and drywall. Finally, Lena asked, Are you doing this because of guilt? No, Graham said without hesitation. I'm doing it because I want to build a world that would have protected you when no one else did. And because I want our boys to grow up seeing what responsibility looks like after failure. She looked at him carefully, her breath clouding the air. You say that? Like you've rehearsed it? I say it because I mean it, he replied. Then more quietly, I know you don't owe me anything. But if this place can help, people can help you, then that's what matters. Lena glanced back toward the skeletal walls and half-finished courtyard. It's a lot. Managing this, running programs, raising 4 kids. You've already been doing it for 9 years, Graham said. This just gives you the keys. That made her pause. The wind picked up, rustling the blueprints tucked into her folder. He continued, You can run it the way you ran that music room, with structure and hope and rules that make space for grace. She was quiet for a long time. Then she whispered, I don't know if I'm ready to live this close to you again. You won't be, Graham said gently. This isn't me asking you to move in. It's me asking you to build something beside me. Her eyes lifted. I don't want to rewrite the past, he added. I want to co-author the future. One where we don't need walls between love and purpose. Lena looked back at the construction, then down at the clipboard. Micah said if we had a yard, he'd plant tomatoes, she murmured. I'll give him a greenhouse. Leo wants a music room. He can design it himself. Isaac wants a tree he can read under. I'll bring in 3. She finally laughed the sound light and surprised. What does Caleb want? He asked. Lena turned to him. He said he just wants a place where everyone stops leaving. That one hurt, but Graham didn't look away. Then I'll stay. 2 weeks later, Graham stood beside Lena at the ribbon-cutting ceremony for what the boys had named the Heart House. Local press had been invited, not national coverage, just a handful of neighborhood leaders, a city council rep, and some parents from the shelter program. The boys each wore little navy blazers and clip-on ties, fidgeting as they waited for the scissors. Leo was chosen to speak. He held the mic with both hands and announced, "This place is for moms who need help and for dads who don't give up." Micah added, "And for science, because science should live where people live." Caleb didn't say anything, but he stood next to Graham the whole time, and Isaac slipped a hand into Lena's. After the ribbon fell, the crowd drifted inside for hot cider and gingerbread. Lena led a tour of the upstairs units. Graham stood back watching her come alive, pointing out the sunlit kitchens, the craft corner, the community calendar with job board postings and tutoring times. She didn't look like someone stepping into a role. She looked like someone finally standing on solid ground. When she returned to him, cheeks flushed from talking, she said, "You really bought the old bakery next door, too. I thought we'd make it a cafe. A job-training kitchen, with enough room for an open mic night. You know, for certain musicians I know. Leo will demand a headline. I wouldn't expect anything less." Lena looked at him for a long time. "You're really not asking for anything back, are you?" "No," Graham said. "Just this." He handed her a single silver key on a red ribbon. "To your new unit. Your space. No conditions." She took it, held it, and for the first time in years, she said something she hadn't dared before. "Maybe we can build something better." That night after the ribbon cutting ended and the cider thermoses ran dry, Lena walked through the nearly finished rooms of the Heart House alone. The scent of sawdust still clung to the air. Paint cans sat in one corner, and light bulbs hadn't been installed in every hallway. But the structure was sound, the rooms were warm, and in every detail from the child-height coat hooks to the chalkboard wall in the tutoring room, she could see the fingerprints of someone who had finally listened. Her boys had danced through the halls like it was Christmas morning. Isaac had already claimed a reading window. Micah asked if he could install a solar panel just for fun. Leo wanted to paint murals in the stairwell, and Caleb, bless him, had quietly asked if they could bring the old beanbag from the shelter because it smells like Mom's room. And now, Lena stood in the unit that would be hers, the manager's space. It was simple. 2 bedrooms, a clean kitchenette, a writing desk tucked beneath a large window overlooking the community courtyard. No chandeliers, no luxuries, just space, purpose. She ran her fingers along the smooth wooden edge of the counter. A year ago she had been rationing rice, arguing with housing boards, singing lullabies to 4 boys in the dark, praying they didn't ask her again why other kids had dads. Now she had this. And Graham, he hadn't tried to insert himself. Not once had he asked her to live with him. Not once had he handed her a check or tried to fix things with grand gestures. Instead, he'd brought sandbags to the flood and stood beside her. That's what made her scared, because this felt like something she could believe in. Lena sat on the floor back against the bare wall key, still wrapped in the red ribbon pressed between her palms. She could still leave. They could stay at the shelter a little longer, finish out the school year, wait until everything was safer, simpler. But deep down, she knew that was fear talking, not wisdom. And then she thought of Caleb's letter again. Just more time. She'd spent so long guarding them, she hadn't realized how much time had already passed, how much they'd grown without roots, how much she had too. Outside her door, she heard a small knock. Mom. It was Isaac. She stood and opened it to find all 4 of them waiting, blankets in hand. Caleb spoke first. "We thought, if this is our new home, we could try sleeping here tonight." "Just one night," Leo added. "We can bring the flashlight." Micah held up a bag of granola bars. We brought snacks. Lena looked at them, at their eager, cautious eyes, and then she opened the door wider. Okay, she said. One night. But in her heart she knew. They weren't just visiting anymore. They were beginning. The wind picked up just after dusk, rattling the window panes of the Hart house with a sudden burst of winter's breath. Snow followed thick, determined, and unexpected. By the time Lena checked her phone, a weather alert blinked across the screen. Storm advisory issued. Travel strongly discouraged after 8 p.m. Of course. She looked up from the kitchenette where she was laying out water cups and granola bars for the boys. They had already unrolled sleeping bags across the hardwood floor of the living room, transforming it into a battleground of plush toys, flashlight shadows, and whispered dares. They were laughing, all four of them. Real, belly-deep laughter. Leo had just tried to balance a granola bar on Micah's forehead. Caleb was pretending to be asleep then, popping his eyes open with dramatic flair. Isaac sat at the edge, sketchbook in hand, quietly documenting it all. Lena's heart swelled. Then 3 sharp knocks on the door. She opened it to find Graham standing there holding a duffel bag and dusted in snow. "I swear I wasn't going to intrude," he said, voice apologetic. "But the road's iced over and my driver spun out. I figured it was safer to walk the last 4 blocks than risk a slide." She opened the door wider without hesitation. "You walked. It was that or stay in a parking garage all night." Lena stepped aside. "Come in. You look like a snowman who took a wrong turn." He chuckled, stamping his boots dry. "I brought emergency supplies." From the bag he pulled out a portable speaker, 3 paperback books, and a small tin of peppermint hot chocolate mix. Leo's eyes lit up. "You brought cocoa." "Only if I'm invited?" Graham said, glancing toward Lena. She shrugged with a small smirk. "The jury's still out, but the boys seem impressed. Good enough for me." An hour later, the storm howled outside, but inside the Hart house warmth pulsed in every corner. The 5 of them sat in a circle around a cluster of battery-operated candles, each boy wrapped in a blanket like a royal robe. Graham, now in sweatpants and mismatched socks, borrowed from Micah's drawer, finished the final page of Where the Wild Things Are in a low theatrical voice. And Max said, "No." But the wild things cried, "Oh, please don't go. We'll eat you up. We love you so." Caleb, who had been curled against a pillow, sat up straighter. "That's kind of scary, but also kind of nice," Isaac added. "They missed him." "They wanted him back," Leo said dreamily. Micah looked at Graham. "Did someone ever tell you to stay, Graham?" Hesitated, then nodded. "Once. A long time ago." "Did you stay?" "I didn't know how to. Back then. Do you know now?" Graham looked at each of them. "I'm still learning, but I want to." That answer seemed to satisfy them. As the night deepened, the storm grew louder, then softer, then quieter, until only a gentle hush remained. The boys fell asleep one by one, curled like kittens in a heap of blankets. Lena sat on the floor near the window, her knees pulled to her chest, sipping the last of her cocoa. Graham joined her, careful not to wake the kids. "It's strange," she whispered. "I always thought we'd never get a moment like this. Not after everything." "I thought about it," he replied. 100 different ways. But never like this. Never with storm warnings and mismatched socks. She laughed softly. "They love you, you know. I hope so. They do. Even Caleb. He still looks at me like I'm one wrong word away from exile. That's just how he tests love. He pushes to see what stays." Graham looked at her. "And you? What about me? What do you push?" Lena was quiet for a long time. Then in a low voice she said, "I push away things I'm afraid to need again." Graham didn't press, didn't lean closer. He just let that truth settle between them like snow on a windowsill. Then she added, "But tonight, I didn't want to push." He looked at her profile, the shadows beneath her eyes, the curve of her lips, the strength in her silence. "I'm here," he said, "even if the storm doesn't stop." And when she turned to him, her eyes softer than they'd been in years, she whispered, "I know." That night, Lena lay beside the boys on a borrowed air mattress. Graham curled up nearby, the floor beneath them hard, but the warmth between them enough. No promises were made, no futures declared. But somewhere in the quiet dark, Caleb shifted in his sleep and reached for Graham's hand, and Graham didn't move. The wind had settled into a hush, the kind that blanketed the city with a peace that felt borrowed, fragile, fleeting. Inside the Heart House, the storm's lull gave way to a softer rhythm. The occasional sigh from a dreaming child, the rustle of blankets, the quiet hum of the building's new heater. Lena hadn't slept. She lay awake, the air mattress squeaking beneath her whenever she shifted. One arm draped protectively across Isaac's back. Her eyes, though heavy, remained fixed on the ceiling where the boys had stuck glow-in-the-dark stars just hours earlier. She counted them in silence. 22 stars. 4 boys. 1 man asleep on the floor nearby. Graham. He was lying on his back, one arm tucked behind his head, the other resting palm up between them, as if waiting for what she didn't know. And maybe that was the difference now. He wasn't grabbing, he wasn't pressing, he was simply present. Lena sat up slowly, careful not to wake Isaac, and tiptoed to the piano in the corner. A small upright used slightly out of tune but good enough for lullabies. She pressed one key, softly, then another. The sound was gentle, uncertain. She played the first few bars of the melody, the one Graham's mother used to sing, the one Lena had hummed when their sons couldn't fall asleep. The notes floated through the room like breath held between heartbeats. Graham stirred, opened his eyes, and watched her. He didn't speak. She continued, fingers warming on the worn keys, adding layers now. A second chord, a variation. Not the exact lullaby anymore, but a new arrangement. Grown, weathered, real. A quiet voice spoke from the darkness. "Did you write that part?" Lena turned. Graham had sat up, arms resting on his knees, face shadowed but open. "I started rewriting it after Leo was born," she whispered. "It felt unfinished, like it needed a different ending." He nodded slowly. "It does." They sat like that for a moment, her at the piano, him on the floor, the boys asleep between them. Then Lena asked, "Do you remember the first time I played for you?" He smiled faintly. "That tiny studio apartment with the red walls. You sat on the floor and used a coffee table as your music stand. And you brought takeout from 3 different places because you didn't know what I liked. You still picked the one I didn't bring," he said, chuckling. "I always did." She looked at him. Really looked. "There was a version of us," she said softly, "that could have worked. If the world had been kinder. If we had been braver." Graham's eyes didn't waver. "Then let's build the version that starts now." She said nothing. But she played one final chord, resolute, low, and warm. It didn't promise forever, but it didn't walk away either. Spring came slow and shy to the city. Snow gave way to puddles, puddles to shoots of green. And outside the Heart House, the first daffodils appeared near the courtyard. Bright, stubborn things blooming through the cracks of last year's frost. Inside, life was blossoming too. The boys adjusted quickly. Morning routines fell into place. Cereal spills, mismatched socks. Isaac's whispered reading before sunrise. Caleb pretending he didn't care about Graham's pancakes while secretly taking seconds. Leo had claimed the music nook as his own, and Micah had already drawn blueprints for a rooftop telescope station. Lena watched it all with a guarded kind of awe, the kind that came after surviving too many storms. She wasn't sure when it had started feeling like home. Maybe the first time Leo left his shoes in the middle of the hallway like he owned it. Maybe when Caleb stopped triple-checking the lock every night. Or maybe it was the moment she opened the front door and found Graham not announcing, not knocking, just standing there with takeout and a movie the boys had been asking for. He never stayed too long, never pushed, but he always showed up. One evening, the twins' school hosted a family art night. Children and parents filled the cafeteria painting paper lanterns and clay animals. Leo painted a grand piano with stars on it. Isaac sculpted a tiny book with impossibly delicate pages. Micah created a model of the Heart House courtyard. And Caleb painted 2 doors standing side by side, each with a key. What's this? Lena asked gently. He shrugged. It's our house. But why 2 doors? He didn't answer, but she saw it. Clear as day. One for her, one for Graham. Connected but separate. Together but free. That night, after the kids fell asleep, Lena stood by the window with a cup of peppermint tea, watching lights flicker on across the complex. She heard footsteps behind her, soft but familiar. Graham. He'd just returned from a late meeting with the city's housing coalition. Still in his rolled-up sleeves and scuffed dress shoes, he looked more like a man building dreams than a man running an empire. I have something for you, he said quietly. She turned. What is it? He reached into his coat and pulled out a tiny black box. Her breath caught, but when he opened it, there was no ring. Just a key, simple, brass, worn at the edges. Lena stared. It's not a proposal, Graham said quickly. It's not a promise, just a key. A key to what my unit, he said. Across the courtyard. I had it redone. Nothing fancy. Just a place the boys can visit. Or you. Or not. I don't expect anything. She touched the key lightly, not taking it yet. You're really building a whole life next door to us. I'd rather be next door to you, he said, than across a city with a title you never asked for. She was silent for a long time. Then slowly she reached into her pocket and pulled out a second key. Attached to a red ribbon. This is to mine, she said. He stared. I wasn't sure when I'd give it to you, she added. But I think I want you to be part of this. As we are. No labels, no pressure, just us, co-parenting, coexisting, co-creating something that actually works. He took the key with reverence as if it were something sacred, which in a way it was. Weeks passed, the courtyard filled with laughter chalk drawings, and the scent of tomato plants micas were thriving. The transitional apartments slowly filled with new families, women who brought their own stories and hope welcomed without judgment. Graham became Mr. G to half the kids. He hosted science night, helped Isaac build a bookshelf, showed Caleb how to use a screwdriver, played keyboard with Leo while Lena harmonized from the kitchen. One afternoon they all gathered under the pergola for a picnic. The boys had made a banner with construction paper and glitter team Whittaker Castillo 1 house. 2 keys. 1 heart. Graham read it aloud and choked back a laugh. That's a mouthful. Leo grinned. You said we needed a family name. And it had to be fair, Micah added. Caleb shrugged. You don't have to be married to be a family. Isaac nodded, his tone serious. You just have to stay. Lena caught Graham's gaze across the picnic table. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. This was their family, messy, unlabeled, full of light. That night, as Lena tucked the boys into bed, Caleb asked, Are we weird? She smiled. Why do you say that? Because we don't have one house like other families. Lena brushed a curl from his forehead. But we do have one heart. He smiled, sleep already pulling at his eyes. Good, he murmured. Then no one ever gets left out. Across the courtyard, Graham lit a small candle and placed it on the windowsill. A tradition his mother used to do once upon a time. A light for those who come home. And for the first time in 10 years, it didn't feel like a memory. It felt like now. Sometimes family isn't built by blood or bound by labels. It's shaped in the quiet choices to stay, to show up, and to begin again. In a world full of closed doors, this story reminds us love makes room. Even if it means 2 keys, 2 homes, or 2 chances to get it right. Let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We love seeing how far these stories reach. And if stories of healing, second chances, and unexpected reunions speak to your heart, be sure to subscribe and click to watch the next one. Thanks for being here. See you in the next story.